November 1st through the 7th, Doctrine and Covenants sections 125 through 128. A voice of gladness for the living and the dead. Remember to record your feelings as you study, so that you can reflect on them and share them with others. In August 1840, a grieving Jane Neyman listened to the prophet Joseph speak at the funeral of his friend Seymour Brunson. Jane's own teenage son, Cyrus, had also recently passed away. Adding to her grief was the fact that Cyrus had never been baptized, and Jane worried what this would mean for his eternal soul. Joseph knew how she felt. He had wondered the same thing about his beloved brother, Alvin, who also died before being baptized. So the prophet decided to share with Jane and everyone else at the funeral what the Lord had revealed to him about those who had died without receiving the ordinances of the gospel, and what we can do to help them. The doctrine of baptism for the dead thrilled the saints. Their thoughts turned immediately to deceased parents, grandparents, and other family members. Now there was hope for them. Joseph shared their joy, and he used joyful, enthusiastic language to express what the Lord taught him about the salvation of the dead. Let the mountains shout for joy, and all ye valleys cry aloud, and all ye seas and dry lands tell the wonders of your eternal King. Doctrine and Covenants 128:23. The Lord wants me to care for my family. After returning home from the latest of several missions to England, Brigham Young received another important calling from the Lord to take especial care of his family, who had suffered in his absence. As you ponder how this and other counsel in section 126 applies to you, consider these words from Sister Bonnie L. Oscarson, former Young Women General President. She said, "Remember that some of the greatest needs may be those right in front of you. Begin your service in your own homes and within your own families. These are the relationships that can be eternal, even if, and maybe especially if, your family situation is less than perfect. You can find ways to serve, lift, and strengthen. Begin where you are. Love them as they are, and prepare for the family you want to have in the future. The Lord knows my joys and sorrows." False accusations and the threat of arrest had again forced Joseph Smith into hiding in August 1842, and yet the words he wrote to the saints during this time, in section 127, are full of optimism and joy. What do verses 2 through 4 teach you about God? About how you can face personal trials? Consider recording how the Lord is sustaining you in the deep water of your life. Whatsoever you record on earth shall be recorded in heaven. As you read section 127 verses 5 through 8, and also section 128 verses 1 through 8, look for the reasons why the Lord gave Joseph Smith such specific instructions about recording baptisms for the dead. What does this teach you about the Lord and His work? The salvation of my ancestors is essential to my salvation. It's clear from what God revealed through Joseph Smith why our ancestors, who weren't baptized in this life, need our help for their salvation. But why do you think our ancestors' salvation is necessary and essential to our salvation? Verse 5 in section 128 teaches us, "The ordinance of baptisms for the dead was prepared before the foundation of the world." What does this truth teach you about God and His plan? What does President Henry B. Eyring's message, "Gathering the Family of God," add to your understanding? Joseph Smith used phrases like binding power, welding link, and perfect union when teaching about priesthood ordinances and baptism for the dead. Look for these and similar phrases as you read section 128 verses 5 through 25. What are some of the things that, through Jesus Christ, can be bound together because of priesthood ordinances for the dead? Why is bold a good word to describe the doctrine of salvation for the dead? What impresses you about Joseph Smith's words in verses 19 through 25? How do these verses affect the way you feel about temple service for your ancestors, about Jesus Christ? What do you feel inspired to do? For more study, see also 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 29. Also, Dale G. Renlund's talk, Family History and Temple Work, Sealing and Healing. Reading this counsel to Brigham Young might inspire your family to talk about how you might spend more time taking a special care of each other. What are some saving and perfecting blessings of family history work? You might find some ideas in the video, The Promised Blessings of Family History. Consider making a paper chain with family members and ancestors' names on each link to show how family history and temple work creates a welding link connecting us with our ancestors. Maybe you could do some research on FamilySearch.org to find additional family members and see how long your chain grows. Perhaps family members could search these verses for words that show Joseph Smith's excitement about the gospel of Jesus Christ and the salvation of the dead. Family members could share experiences that have made them excited about this work too. Or you could seek such experiences together on FamilySearch.org/discovery. Phoebe and Wilford Woodruff were living near Nauvoo when Joseph Smith began teaching about baptism for the dead. Phoebe wrote about it to her husband, Wilford, who was serving a mission in England. She said, "Brother Joseph has learned by revelation that those in this church may be baptized for any of their relatives who are dead, and had not a privilege of hearing this gospel, even for their children, parents, brothers and sisters, grandparents, uncles and aunts. As soon as they are baptized for their friend, they are released from prison and they can claim them in the resurrection and bring them into the celestial kingdom. This doctrine is cordially received by the church, and they are going forward in multitudes. Some are going to be baptized as many as 16 times in one day." Wilford Woodruff later said of this principle, "The moment I heard of it, my soul leaped with joy. I went forward and was baptized for all my dead relatives I could think of. I felt to say, 'Hallelujah!' When the revelation came forth revealing to us baptism for the dead, I felt that we had a right to rejoice in the blessings of heaven." Like Sister Woodruff, Violet Kimball heard about baptism for the dead while her husband, Heber, was away preaching the gospel. She also wrote to him, "President Smith has opened a new and glorious subject, which has caused quite a revival in the church, that is, being baptized for the dead. Paul speaks of it in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 29. Joseph has received a more full explanation of it by revelation. It is the privilege of this church to be baptized for all their kinsfolks that have died before the gospel came forth, even back to their great-grandfather and mother. By so doing, we act as agents for them and give them the privilege of coming forth in the first resurrection. He says they will have the gospel preached to them, but there is no such thing as spirits being baptized. Since this order has been preached here, the waters have been continually troubled. During conference, there were sometimes from 8 to 10 elders in the river at a time baptizing. I want to be baptized for my mother. I calculated to wait until you come home. But the last time Joseph spoke upon the subject, he advised everyone to be up and at doing and liberate their friends from bondage as quick as possible. So I think I shall go forward this week, as there is a number of neighbors going forward. Some have already been baptized a number of times over. Thus you see there is a chance for all. Is not this glorious doctrine?" Once the baptismal font was completed in the Nauvoo temple, baptisms for the dead were performed there instead of in the river. Phoebe Chase, a resident of Nauvoo, wrote to her mother about the temple, describing the baptismal font as the place where we can be baptized for our dead and become saviors on Mount Zion. She went on to explain that in this font I have been baptized for my dear father and all the rest of my dead friends. Now I want to know what your father's and mother's names are so that I can release them, for I desire to relieve the dead. The Lord has spoken again and restored the ancient order. In writing to her friends and family about baptism for the dead, Sally Randall recalled the passing of her son George. "Oh, what a trying time that was to me, and it seems yet that I cannot be reconciled to have it so. But his father has been baptized for him, And what a glorious thing it is that we believe and receive the fullness of the gospel as it is preached now, and can be baptized for all of our dead friends and save them as far back as we can get any knowledge of them. I want you should write me the given names of all of our connections that are dead as far back as grandfathers and grandmothers at any rate. I intend to do what I can to save my friends, and I should be very glad if some of you would come and help me, for it is a great work for one to do alone. I expect you will think this is strange doctrine, but you will find it to be true.